Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a plant that didn't just grow alongside humanity, but actually helped shape our evolution for, well, over 1 billion years. A plant so fundamentally woven into our biology that its chemical compounds could unlock remedies for an astonishing array of illnesses, from everyday aches to conditions as complex as cancer and Alzheimer's. Sounds like something out of a futuristic movie, right? But what if it's simply, well, deeply rooted science?
Indeed. Today we're exploring a compelling body of evidence suggesting this isn't science fiction, but a fascinating, albeit often overlooked, biological truth. We're examining how our own bodies are exquisitely designed to interact with compounds found in cannabis and the profound implications this connection holds for health and medicine.
Right. And our in depth exploration today draws primarily from two key sources.
Yeah.
First, a comprehensive work by Richard Lawrence Norman titled Future's Mirror: The Endocannabinoid System in Human Pathology, published back in 2017. This document takes us on an incredible journey through evolutionary biology, ancient history, and cutting edge clinical data.
Yeah, it's quite a piece of work.
And second, we'll shift to a very practical and timely question. Recent research on cannabis use and driving performance specifically. A 2025 study by Marcotte et al., published in Psychopharmacology, which scrutinizes the short-term residual effects of smoked cannabis on simulated driving.
And our mission really is to help you cut through the noise and understand the vast therapeutic potential of cannabis, its deep evolutionary roots, and maybe some of the historical and economic forces that have shaped its place in modern medicine. We'll focus on what's practically useful for you to know, noting both the benefits and potential risks, the limitations of the research we have, and the broader public health impacts. Think of it as your shortcut to being genuinely well informed on this complex subject.
Sounds perfect. So, to truly appreciate the power of this plant, we first need to understand the remarkable system within us that it connects with. Let's call it our body's master regulator, the endocannabinoid system, or ECS. So, for those of us who might have only heard the name, what exactly is it and why is it considered so incredibly important?
Well, what's truly fascinating here is that the endocannabinoid system acts like a vast internal communication network. It's this complex web of signaling molecules, receptors, and enzymes found throughout your entire body. Imagine it as your body's internal maestro, constantly working to maintain balance and harmony across a huge range of physiological processes, from sleep and mood to appetite and pain.
Yeah,
It's fundamental.
a maestro. I like that. So, what are the instruments in this orchestra? What are the main components?
Okay, good question. This intricate system has three main components. First, you have the endocannabinoids themselves. These are natural compounds your body produces internally, on demand when needed. The two most well-known are anandamide, often called the bliss molecule, because it contributes to feelings of well-being.
Ah, the bliss molecule. Heard of that one.
Exactly. And the other big one is 2-arachidinoyl glycerol, or 2-AG. Think of these as your body's very own homemade cannabinoids. They're quite similar in function to the compounds found in the cannabis plant, the phytocannabinoids.
Okay, so our body makes its own. What's next?
Second, we have the receptors, primarily known as CB1 and CB2. These are specialized proteins on the surface of your cells that act like locks, basically.
Hmm.
They're waiting for the right endocannabinoid or an external cannabinoid from plants like cannabis to bind to them and trigger a specific cellular response.
Like a key in a lock.
Precisely.
Okay.
Now, the CB1 receptors are incredibly abundant, especially within your central nervous system. In fact, they're the most common type of G protein-coupled receptor in the brain. You find them concentrated in areas vital for memory, like the hippocampus, emotion in the amygdala, movement in the basal ganglia, our senses. They're everywhere. They play a critical role in fine-tuning your brain's chemistry by modulating the release of various neurotransmitters, things like dopamine, serotonin, GABA,
Yeah.
the big players.
So they're like the brain's volume knobs.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. And beyond the brain, you'll also find CB1 receptors in your pituitary gland, immune cells, reproductive tissues, highlighting their really broad influence.
Okay, that's CB1. What about CB2?
Then there are the CB2 receptors. These are primarily found on immune cells throughout your body, which tells you they're significantly involved in your immune response. But they're not just limited to immunity. You'll also find them in your skin, your gut, and on various cells in your cardiovascular and nervous systems too. CB2 receptors are heavily involved in anti-inflammatory responses and anti-nociception. That just means they play a crucial role in combating inflammation and helping to relieve pain throughout the body.
Inflammation and pain,
Okay.
key functions. So we have the body's cannabinoids, the receptors. What's the third piece?
The third component of the ECS are the enzymes. These are the workers, you could say. They're responsible for both creating these endocannabinoids when needed, and just as importantly, breaking them down once their job is done.
Hmm.
This precise control ensures that the effects are localized and temporary, preventing overstimulation.
Got it. Create and destroy. Keeps everything in check.
Exactly. It's a finely tuned system.
So it's not just a collection of parts, but a dynamic internal communication system. How does it actually communicate? What's its unique style or its language, if you will?
It's a fantastic question because the ECS truly employs a unique retrograde signaling mechanism. Most neurotransmitters typically send signals in one direction, from a sending neuron, the presynaptic one, to a receiving neuron, the postsynaptic one.
Right, the standard way.
But endocannabinoids flip this script. They are released from the receiving neuron, the postsynaptic one, and then travel backward across the synapse, that tiny gap between neurons, to the sending neuron.
Whoa, backwards. That is different.
It is. Think of it like a dynamic feedback loop. It's the receiving neuron sending a message back to the sender, saying, hey, maybe play that note a little softer next time, or hold off for a second.
Yeah.
It influences the sender's future activity. This backward communication helps fine-tune and regulate the release of other neurotransmitters, essentially putting a brake on excessive nerve activity when needed. It's incredibly elegant.
That's quite a sophisticated dance happening inside us. And what about the sheer complexity of it all? Is it just these few components, or is there more to this intricate system than meets the eye?
Oh, the astonishing complexity of the ECS is truly something to behold. It's definitely not just a simple lock and key mechanism. For instance, CB1 and CB2 receptors don't just exist independently. They can actually team up, forming these complex pairs called heteromers that influence each other's activity in surprising ways.
Heteromers. Okay, so they talk to each other too.
Yeah, like a dimmer switch for each other's signals almost.
Mm.
And this complexity extends beyond just the endocannabinoids and their receptors. Our sources highlight that while there are roughly 60 to maybe 113 known cannabinoids, our bodies interact with the number varies a bit.
Right.
The cannabis plant itself contains over 400 distinct chemicals. These include not just phytocannabinoids, the plant-derived ones, but also other naturally occurring active components like terpenoids.
Terpenoids, those are the aromatic compounds, right? Give plants their smell.
Exactly, like pine or citrus or lavender, and also flavonoids, which contribute to color and flavor. All these compounds interact in a coordinated fashion, creating what scientists call the entourage effect. This means the whole plant, with its full spectrum of compounds, often works synergistically to produce effects that are greater or perhaps more nuanced than any single isolated compound could achieve on its own.
The whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Precisely. It's a beautiful testament to nature's intricate design.
Okay, so this sophisticated internal system exists within us. Now let's connect it to the plant itself. Richard Lawrence Norman in Future's Mirror argues that the presence of the ECS is no accident. He says it's a direct result of billions of years of evolution, creating what he calls a synergistic interactive dynamic. Here's where it gets really interesting and perhaps even a bit mind-blowing.
Yeah, this raises a crucial question. Why does this plant appear to have such a profound and diverse set of advantages for human health? It seems almost too good to be true sometimes. But the evolutionary hypothesis, as detailed by Norman, posits that the human endocannabinoid system and its preformative ancestors have co-evolved with cannabis and its predecessors for an astonishing 1.2 billion years.
1.2 billion with a B.
Billion with a B. To put that into perspective, this timeline stretches all the way back to the very divergence of plants and animals. The core idea is that through this immense span of time, advantageous mutations, little changes in our genes that facilitated interaction with cannabis compounds, were naturally selected and retained. This led to a deep, adaptive, and beneficial relationship woven into our very biology. It's not just a plant we consume. It's arguably a fundamental part of our shared evolutionary story.
Wow, okay, that reframes things quite a bit.
Yeah.
So, but the system itself must be ancient then.
Incredibly ancient. If you look into the origins of these ECS receptors, phylogenetic analysis by McPartland and Pruitt back in 2002 provides compelling evidence. They found that CB1 and CB2 receptors are truly ancient, appearing in a vast array of life forms across the animal kingdom. Mammals, birds, amphibians, fish, sea urchins, mollusks, leeches, even the primitive freshwater polyp Hydra vulgaris.
Hydra, like the little freshwater creature.
That's the one. This wide distribution across species strongly suggests a fundamental role in life's early development. The first primordial receptor is estimated to date back 600 million years or even earlier. That predates the separation of vertebrates and invertebrates. essentially placing the system as foundational to a huge portion of multicellular life on Earth.
So it was there before backbones even evolved.
Seems like it. And what's even more intriguing is the discovery that related vanilloid G protein coupled receptors, the VR receptors involved in regulating pain perception, appear to be even older than the CB receptors. This implies that anandamide, one of our own endocannabinoids, might have initially served as a key signaling molecule for a more ancient pain-sensing system long before the CB receptor specifically evolved.
Hmm. So the molecule might be older than the specific locks we know today.
Possibly, yeah. This deep history is further supported by the significant genetic divergence between CB1 and CB2 receptors. They share only about 44% identical amino acid residues. That's a strong indicator of a very ancient split between these two receptor types in our evolutionary past.
And does this ancient connection extend beyond animals? You mentioned plants and animals diverging.
Well, it gets even broader. Plants themselves produce cannabinoid active substances. Our sources mention green algae, tomato, soybean, barley, and pine trees all show evidence of compounds that interact with this system, as noted by McPartland and Pruitt. This cross-kingdom interaction reinforces the idea of a shared evolutionary heritage, almost like a universal biological language.
So the system is ancient, the plant is ancient. It's like our bodies and this plant have been evolving together, dancing in a complex biological tango for over 1 billion years. What's the central evolutionary argument then? What does this all mean for us today?
Well, the core evolutionary argument, as Norman posits, is that through continuous adaptation mechanisms like gene duplication and these tiny variations in our DNA sequence known as single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs.
SNPs, right? Little genetic tweaks.
Exactly. Through these, our ancestors' genes adapted to both the plant chemicals they consumed from the outside, exogenous, and their own internal biochemistry, endogenous. Those genetic changes that offered an advantage in this interaction were naturally selected and passed down through generations. Norman provocatively states that the magic of cannabis is therefore no surprise at all. It is a synergistic interactive dynamic born of 1,200 million years of evolution.
So it's not magic, it's evolutionary destiny, almost.
In a way, yeah. And this isn't a static process either. It's ongoing. There are millions of SNPs continuing to shape this intricate relationship, even in the genes encoding our CB1 and CB2 receptors today. It implies that we are, in a very real sense, genetically predisposed to benefit from this plant.
1 billion years of coevolution. That's an incredible thought. It naturally leads us to wonder, if this relationship is so old and fundamental, what does the historical record tell us about human use? Has it always been considered beneficial, or is this a modern rediscovery?
That's the next logical step, isn't it? Yeah. And the historical record overwhelmingly supports a long history of remarkably safe and effective use, stretching back millennia. Cannabis has been used for medicinal and other purposes for some 12,000 years and cultivated for at least 6,000 years.
12,000 years.
Yeah. Ancient Chinese texts from the 3rd millennium BC, for example, describe its therapeutic ability to ease pain and cramps. Emperor Shennong, around 2000 BC, even recorded in the Pinsao Qing that cannabis positively affected rheumatism and gout. Archaeological evidence further solidifies this ancient connection. A 2,700-year-old grave of a Caucasoid shaman revealed cannabis use, likely for medicine or maybe divination rituals.
A shaman's grave. Fascinating.
Isn't it? Ancient Indian texts from 3,000 years ago documented the oral ingestion of cannabis, known as bhang, for its anti-anxiety effects. Sumerian texts also mention its internal use for depression and possibly arthritis. Even in ancient Israel, Palestine, and Judea, delta-6 tetrahydrocannabinol was found in the tomb of a 14-year-old girl, believed to have been used as an inhalant to help facilitate birth.
Wow, helping with childbirth.
Yeah. Moving to the Greek and Roman empires, Dioscorides Materia Medica in the 1st century CE noted cannabis for ear pains, while Pliny mentioned its use for cramped joints, gout, and burns. The Islamic world also embraced it medicinally. In 9th century Persia, Sabur ibn Sahl prescribed cannabis juice for aching pains and migraines, and the 12th century scholar al-Biruni noted its use for chronic pains.
Okay, so widespread use across ancient cultures. What about when it reached the West more formally?
By the time we reach Western medicine, cannabis was widely accepted. In 1640 England, John Parkinson's Theatrum Botanicum cited hemp for digestive issues, colic, gout, inflammations, burns, a whole list. In 1758, Marcandier's treatise on hemp highlighted its power to relax and resolve painful tumors. And critically, cannabis medicines were among the most widely prescribed in the U.S. between 1842 and the 1890s. We're talking sold by prominent companies like Eli Lilly, Squibb, Bart Davis, right up until the 1930s.
Mainstream medicine, Eli Lilly, Squibb.
Absolutely. And here's the really striking part. During this entire period of widespread medical use, the source material states that not one death was reported from these medicines, nor were there reports of abuse or mental disorders, apart from maybe some new user disorientation.
Not one death. That really stands in stark contrast to its later reputation and the perception held by many today, doesn't it?
It really does. It's a dramatic difference.
That's a powerful endorsement from history. If it was so widely accepted and seemed so safe, how on earth did we lose this knowledge? What happened to turn such a beneficial plant into a pariah, something to be demonized? This feels like the plot twist.
It really is. This brings us to a truly unfortunate, almost, well, farcical chapter in modern history. The Great Suppression. The 1937 ban on cannabis in the United States, our sources reveal, was emphatically not based on science or public health concerns.
Not based on science, but that's always the justification we hear.
Right. But consider this. Early American colonies, like Jamestown in 1619, actually mandated growing hemp. It was even legal tender for over 2 centuries.
They force people to grow it.
They did. So at the congressional hearing for the ban in 1937, Dr. William C. Woodward of the American Medical Association testified against it. He argued that science was just beginning to understand cannabis's many chemical compounds and that a ban would deny the world significant medical advancements.
So the AMA was against the ban initially.
Initially, yes. His testimony, however, was swiftly dismissed. Then, according to the source, a flat-out lie was told in Congress, claiming the AMA was in complete agreement with the ban, which they weren't. The primary driving force behind the ban was Harry Anslinger, the commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. His testimony relied heavily on sensationalist yellow journalism from William Randolph Hearst's newspapers. Anslinger made these outlandish claims that cannabis caused violence and was linked to specific racial groups' assertions that were later thoroughly debunked.
The whole reefer madness narrative.
Exactly. And the irony, or perhaps dark humor, is that during the Red Scare later on, Hearst apparently claimed cannabis led to zombie pacifism. The narrative just shifted to fit the fear of the day.
Unbelievable. So what happened to the doctors?
Well, doctors who continued to prescribe cannabis after the ban were prosecuted. The source says 3,000 doctors faced charges in 1939 alone. This effectively forced the AMA to fall in line with the government.
So pressure and prosecution silenced the medical community.
It seems that way. And the narrative takes another tragic turn in the 1970s. Well, Dr. Raphael Mechoulam synthesized THC back in 1964, which reignited scientific interest.
Yeah, that was a big step.
It was. But the promising avenues quickly became constrained. In 1976, U.S. pharmaceutical companies successfully lobbied the federal government to finance and judge all the research into cannabis.
Wait, they got to judge the research they funded?
According to Norman, yes. This allowed them, as he points out, to suppress existing positive research on the whole plant and prioritize the development of patentable synthetics of cannabis molecules. They came with a tempting promise of no highs. Norman contends this created a true, unacknowledged human tragedy. The system also established what he calls a credibility barrier.
A credibility barrier? What's that?
Essentially, it dismisses research not funded by specific approved agencies or published in certain high-impact journals, effectively rigging the system against natural, unpatentable compounds. Richard Norman even experienced this firsthand. His team submitted a paper on quantum information-based pharmacology related to this, and it was rejected by PubMed simply because it wasn't funded by an approved agency.
Wow. So the funding source determined the scientific validity.
That's the implication. It's a stark example of how financial incentives can subtly, or maybe not so subtly, steer scientific inquiry away from potentially beneficial natural remedies that just don't fit the profitable model.
Given this incredible history, it's hard not to feel like we've missed out on so much potential. But let's turn to what modern science, even amidst the suppression, does tell us about what cannabis and its constituents can actually help with. We're talking about a truly impressive and diverse list of clinical applications.
Yeah, this is where the deep evolutionary connection translates into demonstrated functional potential, despite the hurdles. The source material presents an overwhelming volume of literature supporting the therapeutic utility of cannabinoids and cannabis extracts across a vast range of conditions. It really highlights the principle that knowledge is most valuable when understood and applied, especially when it comes to understanding how complex natural compounds interact with our equally complex biology.
So where do we start? What's the key principle behind how it works therapeutically?
Well, to really grasp the therapeutic breadth of cannabis, we had to revisit that entourage effect we mentioned earlier. Cannabis is far more than just THC or CBD. It's that complex blend of over 400 chemicals, phytocannabinoids, terpenoids, flavonoids. The evidence strongly suggests these compounds don't act in isolation, but rather work synergistically together.
Like a well-coordinated team.
Exactly. Studies have shown that the raw plant's full spectrum of interactive phytochemistry often produces fewer undesirable side effects, things like anxiety or panic, compared to isolated synthetic THC alone. For example, the presence of CBD can actively mediate and reduce THC's psychoactive effects, diminishing anxiety and paranoia for many users.
So CBD can kind of balance out the THC high.
In many cases, yes. The synergistic interactions can manifest in several ways. Multi-target effects, where different compounds hit different biological pathways, improved pharmacokinetics leading to better absorption in the body, and even a significant reduction of adverse events. It's a holistic interaction, far greater than the sum of its individual parts.
That makes perfect sense, a whole plant working together. So let's dive into some of these key cannabinoids and their individual superpowers, keeping the entourage effect in mind. What do we know about the most famous one, THC?
Okay, starting with THC, or delta-9 THC. It's the primary psychoactive compound, the one most people know about, and it acts as a partial agonist at both CB1 and CB2 receptors. Its therapeutic effects are really extensive. It's a potent pain reliever, a muscle relaxant, an antispasmodic, and a bronchodilator, which can help with asthma.
Bronchodilator. Opens the airways.
Yes. And notably, it also acts as a powerful neuroprotective antioxidant. Studies cited suggest it has 20 times the anti-inflammatory power of aspirin and double that of hydrocortisone. And crucially, without the gut or kidney problems often associated with those conventional drugs like THX1, COX2 inhibitors.
20 times aspirin, that's significant.
It is. When THC stimulates CB1 receptors, it can suppress overactive movement, cause deep relaxation, and produce significant pain relief. It also influences vital cellular processes related to growth and metabolism. CB2 receptor stimulation by THC, on the other hand, also contributes to pain relief and anti-inflammatory activities. But interestingly, it does not seem to stimulate appetite. That's more of a CB1 effect.
Ah, okay. Different receptors, slightly different jobs.
Exactly. And here's an important practical insight from the source material. When THC is taken orally, like in an edible, it's metabolized by the liver. This generates a metabolite called 11-hydroxy-THC. This metabolite actually interacts more efficiently at CB1 receptors than THC itself. This suggests that oral administration might offer distinct advantages, or at least different effects, for certain treatments compared to inhaling.
Interesting. So how you take it really matters. What about THCA, its precursor? I understand it's non-psychotropic, so it won't give you a high, but still has powerful effects.
Precisely. THCAA, or tetrahydrocannabinolic acid, is the natural precursor to THC found abundantly in raw, unheated cannabis plants. You juice raw cannabis, you get THCA, not THC. And yes, it is non-psychotropic, meaning no high. Despite this, its properties are profound. It's an immunomodulator, anti-inflammatory, neuroprotective, and anti-neoplastic, meaning it helps combat cancer.
Wow, even without the high, how does it work?
It works by inhibiting key inflammatory pathways like TNF-alpha release, interacting with other receptor systems like TRP channels, and boosting your body's own endocannabinoids by inhibiting the enzymes that break them down. Studies have shown it increased nerve cell health in a Parkinson's disease model and reduced the viability of various cancer cell lines in vitro. So it's potent even in its raw form, although its access to the brain is somewhat limited by the blood-brain barrier.
Feel very promising. Then there's CBD, which has become so popular lately. What are its specific strengths, especially since it's non-psychoactive?
Right. CBD, or cannabidiol, is indeed non-psychotropic and has a multitude of therapeutic actions. It exhibits sedative effects for some people and is well known for reducing THC-associated anxiety, modulating THC's psychoactive impact through various complex mechanisms. CBD is also a powerful neuroprotective antioxidant, reportedly even more potent than vitamin C or E in some contexts.
More potent than vitamin C.
In terms of antioxidant capacity in some models, yes. It also helps increase the availability of your body's own bliss molecule, anandamide, by inhibiting its breakdown. Furthermore, CBD helps regulate cell migration, making it potentially helpful in disorders where cells move abnormally, like endometriosis. Beyond these, CBD is a noted anticonvulsant. This is where drugs like Epidiolex come from. It has anti-nausea properties and demonstrates cytotoxic effects in breast cancer and other cancer cell lines. And this is crucial. While preserving normal, healthy cells, that selectivity is key.
Kills cancer cells, but spares healthy ones. That's the holy grail.
It's certainly a major goal. It's also anti-inflammatory in conditions like arthritis and can stop abnormal protein accumulation and nerve cell damage relevant for neurodegenerative diseases. And remarkably, CBD has been shown to be highly effective against MRSA, that dangerous antibiotic-resistant staph infection, even at very low concentrations.
MRSA too. It really is versatile.
It is. And it's worth noting again, full cannabis extracts containing CBD are generally found to be more potent than the pure isolated CBD compound alone. Again, emphasizing that entourage effect.
That's an impressive list already, and we're just scratching the surface of a few cannabinoids. What about some of the other less discussed but potentially equally important compounds?
Absolutely. The plant is a veritable natural pharmacy. Take CBDA, cannabidiolic acid. It's the raw precursor to CBD, like THCA is to THC. It shares some properties, like inhibiting ECS degradation enzymes and targeting TRP channels. Then there's CBN, cannabinol, which forms as THC ages or is exposed to oxygen. It's known to be mildly sedating, enhance some effects of THC, possess anticonvulsant and anti-inflammatory properties, promote bone formation, and even inhibits breast cancer resistance protein, which is a common cause of chemotherapy resistance in some patients.
So it could make chemo work better.
Potentially, yes. Then CBC, cannabicromin, is another fascinating one. It reduces inflammation with pain-relieving effects and exhibits potent antibacterial and antifungal activity, sometimes superior to THC. It's also a strong agent against MRSA. CBC also functions as an antidepressant and positively affects neural stem cells. And then there's CBG, cannabigerol, which is actually the biosynthetic precursor, the mother cannabinoid, from which CBC, CBD, and THC are made in the plant.
The mother cannabinoid.
The CBG itself demonstrates pain-relieving, anti-inflammatory, and even stronger antibacterial and antifungal properties than many other cannabinoids. It shows efficacy against breast and prostate cancer, and also has antidepressant qualities, also potent against MRSA.
It sounds like CBGs are really important too.
Very much so. And just a couple more quick mentions. Delta-8-THC, an isomer, or slightly different form, of delta-9-THC. It's an effective antiemetic, meaning it reduces nausea and vomiting, and notably is reported to be non-psychoactive or much less psychoactive, especially in children aged to 13 years, according to one study. Finally, THCV, tetrahydrocannabivarin. This compound can moderate THC's effects, sometimes leading to a faster onset and shorter duration of the high. It may assist with weight loss, increase energy expenditure, help prevent seizures, and reduce pain. It's being heavily researched for metabolic disorders.
Wow, so many different players, each with its own role. It really is complex.
It is. And these are just some of the many cannabinoids identified, each with its own unique therapeutic profile, underscoring the incredible biochemical diversity and therapeutic potential of the plant.
Beyond the cannabinoids themselves, you mentioned other compounds like terpenoids that contribute to this entourage effect. What role did they play in this whole symphony?
Terpenoids are incredibly important. They are the compounds responsible for cannabis's distinct and often delightful scent, pine, citrus, floral notes. There are over 200 of them identified in cannabis.
And they're generally safe.
Yes, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration has designated many of these as generally recognized as safe, GRAS, for consumption, as they're found in many plants we eat. Crucially, they are not just for aroma. They contribute significantly to the entourage effect, synergizing with cannabinoids to address issues like pain, inflammation, depression, anxiety, addiction, epilepsy, cancer, and various fungal and bacterial infections, including MRSA.
So they boost the effects of cannabinoids.
They seem to, yes, and have their own effects too. These compounds typically vaporize at similar temperatures to THC, which is relevant for inhalation methods. They easily permeate lipid membranes and can cross the blood-brain barrier, allowing them to exert widespread effects throughout the body.
Can you give us a few examples?
Sure. Let's highlight a few prominent ones. Myrcene is often the most common terpenoid in many strains, known for its earthy, musky aroma. It acts as a pain reliever by blocking inflammatory compounds like prostaglandin E2. It's also thought to contribute to the sedative couch lock effect of some indica strains. Beta-caryophyllene, or BCP, is particularly notable. It's found in black pepper, cloves. It has strong anti-inflammatory effects and also offers stomach protection and anti-malarial properties.
BCP, that one sounds interesting.
It really is, because it directly activates CB2 receptors, just like a cannabinoid, which helps explain its powerful anti-inflammatory and pain-relieving effects. It also works synergistically with both THC and CBD. Plus, it's reported to be protective for the heart, liver, brain, and kidneys, an antioxidant, and an immune modulator. Really a powerhouse.
Wow. What else?
Limonene, as the name suggests, has a citrusy aroma. It shows promise in alleviating depression, inhibits fungi and bacteria, blocks cancer development, and can induce cancer cell death. including in breast cancer models. It might also help with obesity. Linalool, found in lavender, provides sedative, anxiety-reducing, and antidepressant effects. It helps with pain, has anticonvulsant properties, and even some anesthetic effects.
Lavender makes sense for relaxation.
Exactly. Then we have Poulagon, which has a minty aroma. It may help alleviate THC-induced short-term memory loss, suggesting potential applications in conditions like Alzheimer's by protecting acetylcholine, a key brain chemical for memory. Alpha pine smells like pine trees, obviously. It has anti-inflammatory properties, acts as a bronchodilator, and also helps with memory by inhibiting the breakdown of acetylcholine, again pointing to possible applications in Alzheimer's. This diverse range of actions from terpenoids further illustrates the synergistic power of the whole plant.
That's a huge amount of beneficial activity from this one plant. Now let's get specific. What does the research, even the suppressed research, tell us about how cannabis can help with particular conditions? Let's take a deeper look at some of the most notable findings.
Indeed. The research, scattered as it sometimes is, points to efficacy across an astonishing array of conditions, particularly in categories like neurodegenerative diseases such as ALS and Alzheimer's, various forms of cancer including breast and brain, and chronic inflammatory conditions like arthritis and colitis. Let's delve into how cannabinoids impact a few of the most significant challenges, understanding that many of these effects stem from their interaction with the ECS and their potent anti-inflammatory, neuroprotective, and anti-cancer properties.
Okay, where should we start? Maybe neurodegenerative diseases.
Sounds good. For neurodegenerative diseases, the potential is immense. In ALS, or Lou Gehrig's syndrome, THC has been shown in mouse models to delay motor impairment and prolong survival. The plant offers strong antioxidative and neuroprotective effects that could potentially prolong nerve cell survival. CBN, another cannabinoid, also showed benefits in delaying symptom onset in models. Overall, cannabinoids offer promising neuroprotective benefits and may significantly slow progression, possibly extending life expectancy according to some researchers.
That's huge for a disease like ALS with so few options. What about Alzheimer's?
Similarly, for Alzheimer's disease, both CBD and THC show efficacy. Cannabinoids seem to protect against the underlying pathology by blocking microglial-induced neuroinflammation, that's inflammation in the brain's immune cells, and promoting hippocampal neurogenesis, the growth of new brain cells in the memory center. Dronabinol, which is synthetic THC, was effective for agitation and anorexia in AD patients in some studies. THC itself can competitively inhibit acetylcholinesterase, the enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine, similar to some Alzheimer's drugs, and it prevents the aggregation of amyloid beta peptide, a key marker of Alzheimer's pathology. CBD also inhibits damaging inflammatory processes and protects brain cells from beta amyloid toxicity.
So multiple mechanisms of action. Parkinson's too.
Yes, for Parkinson's disease, cannabinoids show neuroprotective effects in the basal ganglia, the brain region affected. And as we mentioned, THCAA has been observed to increase nerve cell health in a Parkinson's model.
Okay, let's switch gears to cancers. This is often where people hear the most dramatic claims. What does the science actually suggest?
The research here is compelling, though much is still preclinical or in early human trials. Generally, cannabinoids can decrease tumor growth in animal models. They inhibit angiogenesis. That's the formation of new blood vessels crucial for tumor growth, and decrease metastasis, the spread of cancer, across various tumor types. And importantly, they often selectively kill cancer cells while protecting healthy, non-transformed cells.
That selectivity again. What about specific cancers? Breast cancer comes up a lot.
Yes, for breast cancer, CBD significantly reduces tumor aggressiveness by decreasing the expression of a gene called ID1 in metastatic breast cancer cells. THC reduces estradiol-induced proliferation, that's estrogen-driven growth, and cannabinoids together can reduce the progression driven by the ERBB2 gene, also known as HER2, via inhibiting a key pathway called ACT. CBD also induces programmed cell death in breast cancer cells by coordinating apoptosis and autophagy, basically, telling the cell to self-destruct or clean itself out.
But there's a nuance you mentioned earlier about THC ratios.
Right, this is an important clinical observation noted in the source material. While much lab research shows THC is anti-cancer, some clinical experience suggests that for specific types of breast cancer, like ER-positive, estrogen receptor positive, or triple positive, a lower THC.CBD ratio, maybe 1.1 or even 1.3, might be required. The concern noted is that high doses of THC, say in a 4.1 ratio, could potentially exacerbate these specific types. A 1.1 ratio appears safe for all breast cancer types according to this clinical perspective. It highlights the need for careful monitoring and personalized approaches and maybe contradicts some lab studies, so caution is advised.
That's a really important practical point. What about brain cancer, glioma?
In glioma, or brain cancer, THC induces apoptosis or programmed cell death in glioma cells. Cannabinoids inhibit the vascular endothelial growth factor, VEGF pathway, which is critical for angiogenesis. Intratumoral administration, injecting directly into the tumor of THC and synthetic cannabinoids, induced considerable regression of malignant gliomas in rat and mouse models. CED also triggers cancer cell death and inhibits glioma cell migration. Cannabinoids selectively inhibit proliferation and induce death of glioblastoma multiform cells, the most aggressive type, and even target glioma stem-like cells, which are notoriously hard to kill. Pilot clinical studies of THC showed good safety and some remarkable anti-tumor effects, according to the authors cited.
That sounds incredibly promising for such a difficult cancer. The source also mentions the Rick Simpson method for skin cancer.
Yes, it does. This is more anecdotal, based on Rick Simpson's own experiences and reports. The method involves topical application of high THC cannabis oils, typically from indica sativa strains. Simpson reports that applying this oil, covered with a bandage and replaced regularly, often leads to the cancer disappearing in less than 3 weeks. He also, remarkably, mentions its efficacy for third-degree burns, claiming it leads to painless healing with no scars. Again, this is anecdotal, but presented as compelling in the source.
Okay. Let's move to chronic inflammatory conditions. Arthritis is a big one.
Definitely. In arthritis, delta-9 THC is described as an orally effective anti-edema, reduces swelling, and pain-relieving agent, with reports suggesting greater analgesic activity than aspirin in some models. CBD is also seen as a potential lead for interfering with inflammatory pathways. Cannabinoids, in general, can modulate the endocannabinoid system to treat inflammatory diseases like rheumatoid arthritis.
This naturally leads to the opioid crisis link you mentioned. How might cannabis help there?
This is a crucial public health point. Cannabinoids may significantly reduce tolerance to and dosages of opioids. Studies show a synergistic interaction between THC and morphine, where co-administration required only 1/4 the dose of morphine to achieve significant pain reduction compared to morphine alone.
1/4 the dose that could save lives.
Absolutely. Reducing opioid dosage reduces the risk of dependence, overdose, and side effects. And historically, cannabis was used in Britain to help treat drug addiction, including opiate addiction, underscoring its potential role in addressing the current crisis. It offers a less harmful alternative for pain management for many.
Okay, maybe just a couple more conditions quickly. Colitis and epilepsy.
Sure. For colitis, an inflammatory bowel disease, CBD is shown to be protective in murine models, and agonists that activate CB1 and CB2 receptors inhibit experimental colitis. For epilepsy seizures, various cannabinoids, including CBD, offer a unique approach to control seizures. CBD displays anti-epileptiform and anti-seizure properties both in vitro and in vivo. This led to the FDA approval of Epidiolex. THCV also shows potential. The anticonvulsant effects might even be potentiated by other compounds, highlighting system interactions.
In depression, lots of people self-medicate with cannabis for mood.
Yes, for depression, some studies suggest decreased depression scores in marijuana users, and it's well known anecdotally that many patients self-treat depressive symptoms. CB1 receptor activation can elicit antidepressant-like behavior in animal models, and dronabinol, synthetic THC, showed antidepressant potential. THC and other cannabinoids seem to exert antidepressant-like actions. The endocannabinoid system itself is increasingly recognized as a valid target for treating depression and anxiety.
That's a truly powerful overview of the plant's capabilities. It highlights a critical tension. All this profound natural healing potential, yet it's often sidelined. This brings us back to a crucial point, one that Richard Norman highlights as a systemic failing. He argues that the focus on patentable molecules often blinds us to other incredibly effective yet inexpensive natural remedies, even for devastating diseases like Parkinson's. What exactly is this profit from poison critique, and how does it affect us?
It's a really critical point in Norman's analysis, yeah. He argues that the dominant pharmaceutical model, focusing on finding a single synthetic patentable molecule to treat complex diseases, rather than embracing the multi-constituent synergistic approach found in nature, has largely been a failed effort, unfortunately to the detriment of millions. He points back to the 1970s when the pharmaceutical companies, as we discussed, successfully lobbied to control cannabis research, effectively steering it away from natural plant extracts towards synthetic alternatives that could be patented and monetized. This, he argues, created that true, unacknowledged human tragedy.
And the credibility barrier plays into this.
Exactly. That system Norman describes, where research not funded by approved agencies or published in specific journals is often dismissed, effectively rigs the system against natural, unpatentable compounds. He contrasts this with what he calls unprofitable but safe molecules for conditions like Parkinson's, which have strong scientific backing but aren't widely used.
Like what, for instance?
Well, he cites vitamin K2. Research shows it acts as a mitochondrial electron carrier, helping to fix cellular energy defects implicated in Parkinson's. Vitamin D significantly prevents disease progression, according to some studies. Glutathione, a major antioxidant that's depleted in Parkinson's. Restoring it slows disease progression and improves symptoms. High-dose thiamine, vitamin B1, effectively reverses motor and non-motor symptoms in some studies. Even cinnamon contains compounds that can protect brain cells in Parkinson's models.
So these common vitamins and even spices show promise.
According to the cited research, yes. Norman hypothesizes that the only reason these inexpensive, effective, non-toxic treatments are not in widespread clinical practice is simply because they cannot be patented. It illustrates his point about how money dictates medical practice.
That's a very strong critique of the current model. Just for balance, could we briefly consider the intended purposes or arguments for the strict regulations and patent systems in medicine, even acknowledging where they might fall short?
That's a fair point to raise. The patent system, in theory, was designed to incentivize innovation and research. Developing a new drug is incredibly costly and time-consuming, often taking billions of dollars in many years. Patents grant companies an exclusive period to recoup those massive investments, which theoretically drives further advancements because they know they can profit. Strict regulations like those from the FDA are intended to ensure drugs are safe and effective before they reach the public, preventing harm. That's the ideal.
Right, the ideal versus the reality.
Exactly. The challenge, as Norma points out, is when these systems become distorted, potentially prioritizing financial gain over genuinely effective, natural, and inexpensive solutions that just don't fit the patentable mold, or when the drive for profit leads to downplaying risks. He extends his critique to what he calls profit from poison, where the pharmaceutical industry focuses on patentable, often toxic drugs with significant side effects. He cites statins as a prime example.
Statins for cholesterol, they're incredibly common.
Extremely common. Norman argues that while they lower cholesterol, their overall benefits for preventing death have sometimes been exaggerated using misleading statistics, and they can have serious side effects, including potentially causing heart failure in some by sabotaging cellular energy production, CoQ10 depletion, and interfering with vitamin K2, which could paradoxically lead to hardening of the arteries.
How can the statistics be misleading?
He points out the common use of relative risk reduction versus absolute risk reduction.
Huh.
Imagine a drug reduces the risk of a rare event from 2 people in 100,000 to 1 person in 100,000 over 5 years. That's a 50% relative risk reduction, which sounds huge.
Yeah, 50% sounds amazing.
But the absolute risk reduction is only 1 in 100,000. You'd need to treat 100,000 people for 5 years to prevent one event. Presenting only the relative risk can dramatically overstate a drug's effectiveness and justify costly treatments, even when safer, cheaper alternatives might exist but lack the profit motive. Similarly, he critiques Abilify, a top-selling antipsychotic, being prescribed widely for depression, often alongside other antidepressants despite its serious side effect profile. Norman concludes that in many instances, this focus means profit overshadows public health, and that an entirely new way to fund scientific discovery is desperately needed.
It's a lot to think about regarding the system we rely on.
It certainly challenges conventional thinking.
Okay, in the absence of mainstream medical research embracing some of these natural options, and given the historical suppression we've discussed, many individuals have understandably turned to alternative approaches. One that gets a lot of attention and is mentioned in our sources is the Rick Simpson oil method. Let's explore what that entails and what the source says about its reported effects.
Right. Given that historical suppression, the source material itself suggests that anecdotal evidence must then assume priority for many people seeking alternatives. The Rick Simpson oil, or RSO method, is a prominent example of this grassroots approach. It involves a specific, often home-based, production and administration protocol for cannabis extracts, primarily using cannabis indica strains. These are largely chosen for their sedative qualities, which Simpson believes are beneficial for healing.
Okay, so how is it made? I understand there are some safety concerns with the process.
Yes, the production method, as detailed by Rick Simpson, involves some crucial steps and serious warnings, primarily due to the use of highly flammable solvents. You'll need high-proof grain alcohol, specifically ethanol, like Everclear, and it's absolutely essential to perform this process outdoors in a well-ventilated area
Outdoors only. Why?
to rapidly dissipate the flammable alcohol fumes and avoid any risk of fire or explosion. It's extremely important. The method involves placing high-quality cannabis bud material in a bucket, dampening it thoroughly with the solvent, and then crushing the material with something like a clean piece of wood to help dissolve the medicinal resins. 2 washes are then performed with the solvent. The first wash reportedly extracts about 75–80% of the resins, with the second wash picking up most of the remainder.
Okay, 2 washes. Then what?
After the washes, the solvent oil mixes filter to remove all the plant material. Then comes the critical step of boiling off the solvent to leave the concentrated oil behind. Simpson strongly recommends using an inexpensive large rice cooker with an open top for this.
A rice cooker. Interesting.
Yes, set to a low heat setting, typically between 100 to 110 degrees C or 210 to 230 degrees Fahrenheit. This temperature range is crucial. It's high enough to ensure decarboxylation, that's the process that activates the THC, by converting THCAA, unlocking its full medicinal benefits. Yet it's also below the point where valuable cannabinoids like THC would begin to vaporize off the oil, preserving its potency. The rice cooker's design, with its temperature sensors, ideally automatically switches to a low keep warm setting if the temperature gets too high, preventing the oil from burning, which would ruin it.
So it helps control the temperature.
Exactly. After the solvent is mostly boiled off and the volume reduces significantly, any remaining water content is evaporated off. This can be done by drawing the oil into syringes and placing them on a gentle heating device, like a coffee warmer, or by putting the oil in a stainless steel container in an oven set to around 120 degrees C, 250 degrees Air, for maybe 30–60 minutes until all bubbling ceases. The resulting thick, dark, grease-like oil is then typically stored in plastic syringes for easy dosing or in dark, airtight containers. Simpson emphasizes that using high-quality bud, especially from sedative indica strains, is paramount for the medicinal value of the final oil.
So once someone has this RSO, what are the dosage guidelines and how is it typically administered? And maybe circle back to the inherent risks or challenges that listeners should be aware of when considering remedies based purely on anecdotal success, no matter how compelling these stories might be.
That's a vital question. Rick Simpson provides very specific dosage instructions in his materials, designed for a gradual increase to allow the body to build tolerance to the psychoactive effects of THC. The initial phase involves starting extremely small, a dose roughly the size of half a grain of short-grained dry rice. This is taken 3 times a day, about every 8 hours. He estimates this is about 14 of a drop from a syringe.
Half a grain of rice? Tiny.
Very tiny to start. Then, every 4 days, the dosage is doubled. This slow, steady increase reportedly helps patients avoid feeling overwhelmingly high as their body acclimates. Most individuals typically reach a target dose of 1 gram or 1 milliliter of oil per day within about 3 to 5 weeks. This usually equals around 8 to 9 drops every 8 hours. The full 60 gram or 60 milliliter treatment, often recommended for serious conditions like cancer, usually takes about 90 days to consume at this rate. However, Simpson notes that some patients with severe conditions have reportedly consumed the full 60 grams much faster, even in 1 month, and subsequently reported being cancer-free.
And after the main treatment?
Following the main treatment, a much reduced maintenance dose of maybe 1 to 2 grams per month, just a drop or two at night, is suggested for ongoing health and prevention.
Okay. How is it usually taken?
As for administration, the preferred method is oral consumption. Simpson advises placing the dose on a finger, perhaps wiping it onto the teeth or under the tongue, and then swallowing it quickly with cold water to minimize any lingering taste. It can also be placed on a small piece of bread or between fruit slices like bananas to make it easier to swallow. For conditions such as prostate or bowel cancer, suppositories are sometimes recommended. This method allows the medicinal cannabinoids to be absorbed directly into the bloodstream in the lower bowel, bypassing the liver's first-pass metabolism, which might offer advantages for some conditions. The dosage is typically the same as oral administration, and for skin cancer, as mentioned earlier, topical application directly onto the affected area is the method used.
Right. Now, back to that crucial point about risks and challenges with anecdotal evidence. It sounds very promising from his perspective, but what are the caveats?
Absolutely. While the anecdotal reports are compelling, and for many people facing serious illness with limited options, they offer hope. The main risk is the lack of standardized, controlled scientific trials. This means dosage, actual efficacy across diverse populations, and long-term safety aren't rigorously tested and confirmed in the way regulated medicines are. There's significant variability in the potency and purity of homemade oils. Potential for contamination exists if preparation isn't done carefully and cleanly. and there's usually an absence of professional medical oversight.
So you don't really know exactly what you're getting.
Often, no. It also means that while many individuals report remarkable success, individual results can vary greatly. What works wonders for one person might not work or might cause side effects for another. The reliance on anecdotal accounts, while understandable in filling a gap where formal research is lacking or suppressed, should always be approached with caution. Ideally, anyone considering this route should try to have open communication with a trusted, knowledgeable healthcare provider if possible, though finding one supportive of this approach can be challenging.
What about side effects and potential interactions with other medications? That's a common concern with any powerful remedy, especially one with THC.
That's a very important consideration, yes. The main side effect reported with RSO, according to Simpson, is primarily sleepiness and the need for rest. He actually considers this crucial for the healing process. While initial use, especially as the dose increases, may cause some unsteadiness, dizziness, or a wandering mind, these effects reportedly diminish quickly as tolerance builds, usually within 3 to 4 weeks for most people.
So you get used to it.
Apparently, yes. Patients are strongly advised not to drive or operate heavy machinery until they become accustomed to the oil's effects. However, Simpson claims that once adapted, it should not impair motor skills for daily activities, though that's a point where objective research would be valuable. Regarding interactions with medications, this is key. RSO, particularly the high THC content, may significantly reduce tolerance to and dosages of opioids and other sedating medications. Patients already on addictive pain medications like hydromorphine are advised by Simpson to cut their conventional pain meds dosage in half on day 1 of starting RSO, and then gradually taper off them completely over maybe 7-14 days.
Why stop the other meds?
Because mixing high doses of RSO with high doses of opioids or sedatives can potentially exacerbate side effects like drowsiness or disorientation. Close monitoring is also advised for patients on heart medications, blood pressure drugs, and diabetes medications, as RSO may affect blood pressure, heart rate, and potentially blood sugar levels, necessitating dosage adjustments of those pharmaceuticals.
And safety in terms of overdose.
A key safety assertion from the source, and generally supported by cannabis research, is that unlike many pharmaceuticals, especially opioids, an overdose of hemp oil really does not do any harm and cannot bring about your death. While taking too much can be unpleasant, causing anxiety or disorientation, it's not considered physiologically lethal. The source also states that cannabis is not physically addictive in the way opioids are, and has historically been used to help curb opiate addiction.
Okay, that covers the RSO perspective well. Let's shift gears now. While the therapeutic potential of cannabis is compelling, there are also very real practical considerations, especially given its increasing legalization across the globe. One common and significant concern is driving impairment. We recently came across a very timely study, published in Psychopharmacology in 2025 by Mark Cott et al., that sheds new light on the short-term residual effects of cannabis on simulated driving performance. What did they look into?
Yes, this study represents an important, and I'd say appropriately skeptical, examination of whether cannabis use has lingering effects that might impact driving safety after the initial high wears off. Previous research has pretty firmly established that acute THC consumption, meaning right after using it, can indeed impair cognitive functions like memory and attention and negatively affect driving simulator performance. Things like increased swerving, difficulty maintaining a constant speed, slower reaction times, those are generally accepted acute effects.
Right, driving while actually high is clearly risky.
Exactly. But the critical question this study tackled is whether there are short-term residual effects, meaning impairment hours, or even days after that acute intoxication is worn off. This has been much less clear and less extensively studied. It's a really key public health question as cannabis becomes more accessible.
What did previous research show on these lingering effects? You mentioned it was unclear.
Well, the findings have been a bit mixed, which is why this new study is useful. For example, Dahlgren et al. In 2020 studied heavy chronic cannabis users who reported abstaining for at least 12 hours. They compared them to non-using controls and found that the cannabis users showed significantly worse driving performance, especially those who started using cannabis before age 16. However, that study had some limitations. The exact abstinence periods weren't precisely known or confirmed objectively. The driving task was quite brief, and they didn't have biological proof of abstinence.
Okay, so some evidence of impairment, but with caveats.
Right. In contrast, another simulator study by Brooks Russell et al. In 2021 looked at daily and occasional users who were 8-12 hours abstinent, comparing them to non-users. Interestingly, in that study, Both cannabis-using groups actually displayed better baseline driving performance on one key measure, less swerving than the control group.
Better performance. That seems counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it? Maybe they were more cautious, or maybe it was just noise in the data. But these conflicting findings really highlight the need for more rigorous and carefully designed research, like the Marcotte study, to guide public policy effectively.
So the Marcotte et al. 2025 study aimed to clarify these residual effects. Can you walk us through its design? What were they specifically trying to find out, and who participated?
Okay. The Marcotte et al. 2025 study was specifically designed to determine if short-term residual cannabis effects lead to worse driving performance in the absence of acute intoxication. They were particularly looking for any dose-response relationship. Does performance get worse with more intense use, or shorter abstinence, or higher baseline THC concentrations in the body? Study included the 191 current cannabis users. They were adults, 21 to 55 years old, used cannabis at least 4 times a month, had a valid driver's license, and drove regularly, at least 1,000 miles per year. Crucially, they were required to abstain from cannabis for at least 48 hours prior to testing.
48 hours, 2 full days. How did they check?
Abstinence was objectively confirmed using oral fluid saliva tests, looking for THC concentrations below 5 ng/ml, a common threshold used in roadside testing research. Though it's important to note, the authors acknowledge that oral fluid tests may only reliably detect THC for about 22 hours post-use in some cases.
So some people reporting 48 hours might have been closer to 24 hours since last detection.
Potentially, yes. It relies partly on self-report for the full 48 hours, but confirmed low levels at testing. The average self-reported abstinence period for participants was actually longer, around 5 days, with a range from 2 days up to 21 days. Study Thea then focused on a smaller subset, 18 of the most frequent users from Study 1. These were people who consumed cannabis on at least 28 of the previous 30 days and used at least 1 gram per smoking day. This high-frequency group was compared to 12 healthy non-cannabis using controls.
Okay, so they looked at general users and then specifically at very frequent users. How did they measure driving?
They measured driving simulator performance using a validated composite drive score, CDS. This combines several key variables related to driving safety, things like lane position control, swerving, speed control, reaction to events, into a single score. They also looked at the individual subtests that make up the CDS.
And what did they find? Were there any surprising or notable findings from this study that might challenge common assumptions about lingering impairment?
Well, the key finding from Marcotte et al. 2025 is quite striking, and yes, it does go against some prevailing assumptions. For regular cannabis users who had abstained for 48 hours or more and had objectively low oral fluid THC concentrations at the time of testing, they found no evidence of residual cannabis effects on simulated driving performance.
No evidence at all.
According to their data and analyses, no significant impairment was detected. This held true across various factors explored in the larger study first. They found no discernible relationship between driving performance and how intensely people use cannabis over the past 6 months, or the number of days they had abstained beyond the minimum 48 hours, or even their baseline cannabinoid concentrations measured in whole blood. And perhaps most tellingly, even when they compared the most frequent cannabis users directly to the non-using control group in Study 2, no significant differences were detected in the composite drive score or its subtests.
Wow. So even the daily heavy users showed no impairment after 48 hours off.
In this specific simulated driving task, yes, that's what they found. This suggests that the acute effects of cannabis intoxication on driving, which, as mentioned, other research suggests largely dissipate about 4.5 hours after consumption, do not necessarily translate into measurable lingering impairment on these basic driving metrics days later, at least under these specific study conditions.
That's quite a significant finding, offering a more nuanced view than simply cannabis impairs driving, period. But I imagine there are always caveats and limitations to consider, especially with studies like this involving simulators and complex human behavior. What should our listeners keep in mind when interpreting these results?
Absolutely. Understanding the limitations is crucial for a balanced perspective, and the authors are commendably upfront about them. First, the statistical power of Study 2, the one comparing frequent users to non-users, was relatively small, 18 versus 12 participants. To confidently detect even a small or medium difference in driving performance, significantly larger sample sizes would be needed, hundreds per group for a small effect, maybe 60 plus per group for a medium effect. This means the study might have lacked the power to detect very subtle differences, even if they actually existed. A non-significant finding doesn't definitively prove no difference exists, just that they couldn't detect one with this sample size.
Okay, so maybe a tiny effect was missed. What else?
Second, the study relied on a simulated driving environment. While simulators offer great control, they only capture a subset of real-world driving aspects. They might not fully represent the complexities, distractions, and higher cognitive demands of actual on-road performance. Real-world epidemiological studies on cannabis legalization and crash rates have yielded mixed results, making direct real-world implications challenging to draw solely from simulator studies.
Simulators aren't the real world. Got it.
Third, the task complexity of the simulated drive was relatively short, about 25 minutes. It might not have been challenging enough or long enough to reveal subtle decrements, particularly in things like sustained attention or decision-making under pressure, which could potentially be impacted by residual effects over longer periods or more demanding driving scenarios.
Maybe a longer, harder drive would show something different.
It's possible. Fourth, there were some unmeasured variables. The study did not include measures of cannabis withdrawal symptoms, like irritability or sleep disturbance, although the authors noted none were spontaneously reported by participants. Also, it didn't include a direct measure of reaction time, which some reviews suggest cannabis can decrease acutely, and it wasn't designed to measure impulsivity, which another study suggested might play a role.
So some other factors weren't looked at.
Right. And finally, the user intensity of many participants in the main study, Study I, was arguably on the lower side compared to some definitions of heavy chronic use. The mean blood THC-COH concentration, a marker of past use, was 12.0 ng/ml. Some literature considers true frequent chronic users as having levels of 40 ng/ml or higher. Only a small fraction of participants in this study met that higher threshold. It's conceivable that residual effects might be more likely to emerge or be more pronounced in a population of more intense chronic users than what was predominantly sampled here, especially in Study A.
Okay, so those are important context. While promising in one sense, the results need to be seen through the lens of those limitations. Small sample for comparison, simulation versus reality, task simplicity, unmeasured factors, and potentially lower intensity users overall. What's the overall public health impact and key takeaway for our listeners, given what we've learned?
Well, the key takeaway is that this study, while clearly limited in scope and power, provides some valuable initial data suggesting that short-term residual effects on basic simulated driving performance after at least 48 hours of abstinence and objectively low oral THC levels may not be as pronounced or as certain as sometimes assumed. For public health, this is an interesting data point that could inform future guidance and research, helping us move away from broad generalizations toward a more nuanced understanding based on factors like time since last use, dose, frequency, and individual differences. However, the noted limitations mean that caution is still very much warranted. This one study doesn't close the book. Further, more robust research is critically needed, particularly studies with larger sample sizes, more complex and sustained driving tasks, both simulated and ideally on-road, objective confirmation of longer abstinence periods, and inclusion of higher intensity chronic users. It really underscores the ongoing need for rigorous, unbiased scientific inquiry to fully understand the complex effects of cannabis in all contexts. Ensuring public safety is prioritized with evidence-based policy, rather than policy based on outdated assumptions or incomplete data.
Excellent summary. What an incredible journey through the human body, ancient history, cutting-edge science, and even into the driver's seat of a simulator. We've seen how the endocannabinoid system is not just some quirky biological footnote, but a deeply integrated network sculpted by evolution to interact with compounds found in plants like cannabis. It truly is evolution's forgotten alliance, as Norman puts it.
Indeed. That phrase, "the future lies in the history," from Richard Lawrence Norman, truly resonates here, doesn't it? The historical record, combined with modern empirical evidence, strongly supports the efficacy and safety of cannabis and the profound, complex synergies within its natural chemical profile that entourage effect. Yet we've also seen how non-scientific motives, primarily financial, according to Norman, have unfortunately steered medical research and public perception away from these natural avenues, creating that credibility barrier that potentially prevents promising natural remedies from reaching those who need them most.
It leaves us with a provocative thought, doesn't it? What other beneficial natural compounds or treatments are we missing out on simply because they don't fit the patentable molecule model? The science, as Norman highlights, is there or emerging for things like vitamin K2, glutathione, thiamine, maybe even cinnamon or oxytocin for serious conditions like Parkinson's and mental health issues. But the financial incentives just aren't aligned to bring them into broad clinical practice. This deep exploration truly highlights the stark choice humanity faces: to make wise use of evolution's gifts or to allow profit to overshadow public health, leading perhaps to what Norman Starkley calls profit from poison.
And while concerns about cannabis and public safety, like driving, are absolutely critical and must be addressed with good science, the Marcotte et al. 2025 study gives us an intriguing, if preliminary, data point. It suggests that residual impairment after abstinence may not be as straightforward or as universal as some might assume. It underscores yet again the ongoing need for rigorous, unbiased research to fully understand this complex plant's effects in all contexts, always balancing potential benefits with safety considerations rather than relying on outdated assumptions or incomplete pictures.
So, what does this all mean for you, the curious learner listening today? It means being informed, questioning assumptions, and recognizing that true well being often involves a holistic view looking at our history, our biology, and the systems that influence our health choices. Perhaps, as Norman suggests, simply reintroducing non psychoactive cannabis constituents like whole hemp seeds into our diets could be a simple prophylactic necessity, a small step towards restoring a long lost evolutionary advantage. Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.